When you finally reach that point where you stop reacting, stop chasing, and stop giving her emotional access she didn't earn, something powerful begins to happen. You're no longer moving through life like a man waiting for her approval. You're not crafting your responses around how she might feel, nor are you living in fear of disappointing her. Instead, you start showing her, without saying a word, that you're capable of standing on your own 2 feet. That shift in your energy, that calm detachment, signals something deeper than silence. It signals that you're no longer emotionally dependent on her presence, her attention, or her validation. And that's when she starts to feel it. Because here's the truth: people only take for granted what they believe they'll never lose. When you were overgiving, over explaining, over committing, she got used to the idea that your attention was automatic. She assumed no matter how cold she acted, how distant she became, or how inconsistent she treated you, you'd still be right there waiting. But the second your energy changes, the second your behavior no longer matches her expectations, her mind snaps awake. She starts to sense that her influence over you is fading, and that's something she didn't prepare for. Indifference hits differently because it says the one thing words never could: you no longer control my emotional world. And what really shakes her is the fact that indifference isn't loud. You don't announce it. You don't post quotes about walking away. You don't try to show her you're done. You simply stop reacting. And when a man stops reacting, a woman starts reflecting. When you stop chasing, she starts wondering why you're no longer chasing. When you stop responding instantly, she starts questioning why you're no longer responding instantly. When you stop feeding her ego, she starts noticing the hunger. It's the absence of your attention that becomes the presence of her anxiety. Your silence becomes a message. Your calm becomes pressure. Your distance becomes a reality she didn't expect to feel. Because as much as she may have acted like she didn't care, she was always used to you caring. And when that changes, it forces her to look at you differently. It forces her to evaluate what she lost, what she ignored, and what she didn't appreciate when she had it. She begins to replay old conversations, old moments, old opportunities where you showed up and she didn't. That internal discomfort grows into curiosity, then into regret, and eventually into a fear she can't easily shake off. But the reason it works isn't manipulation, it's alignment. You're no longer giving energy where it isn't reciprocated. You're no longer investing in someone who expected you to operate from a place of need. When you stop needing her, your value rises. When you stop chasing, you become the one worth chasing. And that's the moment she realizes she felt safest, when she knew you cared. And now she no longer has that safety net. And then that's exactly why indifference becomes the turning point that flips everything. Silence is uncomfortable because it forces people to face the truth they've been avoiding. When you stop engaging, stop defending yourself, and stop trying to prove your worth, you create a space she can't escape from. That silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, she starts seeing her own behavior clearly, maybe for the first time. All the things she brushed off, minimized, or justified suddenly start replaying in her mind without your presence there to soften the impact. She begins to look at how she treated you, how she dismissed your effort, and how she overlooked the consistency you brought. Silence makes her sit with the weight of her decisions, and that weight grows heavier every day she doesn't hear from you. Because when you used to speak, she always had noise to hide behind: her excuses, her distractions, her ego, her sense of superiority. But once that noise disappears, the truth becomes louder. She starts questioning whether she pushed too far, whether she misread your intentions, whether she took advantage of your loyalty. She wonders why you haven't checked in, why you're not trying anymore, why you're not chasing what she thought you couldn't live without. It's in that emptiness where her mind begins to spiral. Not because you're punishing her, but because you've stopped protecting her from the consequences of her choices. Silence also forces a shift in perspective. When you were always available, she felt in control. She believed she could predict your reactions and your feelings, but your silence disrupts that predictability. It breaks the pattern she took comfort in. Suddenly, the roles flip. She becomes the one waiting, wondering, and overthinking. She replayed moments where she ignored your messages or replied with one word answers. Now she finds herself checking her phone and hoping you'll reach out, even though she may never admit it. That internal tension builds because silence removes the illusion of power she once held. And the deeper truth is that people always understand your value in your absence more than in your presence. When you stop explaining yourself, she has nothing left to argue against. When you stop trying to fix things, she has nothing left to take for granted. When you stop showing up, she's forced to realize who was holding everything together. That realization isn't instant. It grows slowly, quietly, and powerfully. Every day she doesn't hear from you amplifies the discomfort. Every moment she thinks about you but stops herself from reaching out adds to the emotional pressure she feels. Eventually, she starts seeing the moments where you were patient, supportive understanding. Those memories become sharp reminders of what she lost when she pushed you away. Silence shows her what words never could, that you were the one who cared, the one who tried, and the one she assumed would always be there, even when she didn't deserve you. And when she finally feels the weight of that truth, it hits deeper than any argument or explanation ever could. And that's when she realizes your silence was the loudest message you ever sent. When you finally pull back and stop trying to force anything, something shifts inside her that she can't quite explain. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's not confrontational. It's subtle, but powerful. Because the moment you detach emotionally, you become unpredictable, and unpredictability is one of the strongest psychological triggers in human attraction. When she used to know exactly how you'd react, exactly how quickly you'd respond, exactly how much you cared, everything felt safe and controlled for her. She could take her time, test your patience, pull away, come back, and still feel confident that you'd respond the same way. But once you pull back, once you step into that calm, self contained indifference, her sense of security evaporates. She starts checking your social media even if she never did before. She wonders why you're not online when you used to be. She thinks about what you might be doing, who you might be talking to, and whether someone else is receiving the energy she once ignored. And the more she thinks, the more she spirals, not because you're doing anything manipulative, but because human beings crave predictability. It gives them emotional safety. And the moment you become unpredictable, she loses the control she once felt over the situation. That loss of control triggers curiosity, and curiosity triggers emotional investment. Suddenly, every small detail matters to her. The fact that you didn't react to her last message, the fact that you didn't watch her story, the fact that you didn't like her post. She notices all the little things she once took for granted. The absence of your attention becomes a mystery she's trying to solve. And the more she tries to figure you out, the more her mind focuses on you. That mental loop grows because unpredictability forces her to engage emotionally. She used to know your patterns, your energy, your habits. Now she doesn't. And what she can't predict, she begins to desire. This unpredictability also makes her see you differently. You're no longer the man whose emotions she could easily read. You're no longer the guy whose intentions she could predict. You've become someone she has to think about, someone she has to study, someone she has to consider carefully. You become intriguing, and intrigue is magnetic. She begins to imagine conversations you're having without her, plans you're making without her, improvements you're achieving without her. Women feel attraction through imagination, not certainty. When she can't map out who you are anymore, her mind fills in the gaps with interest, fear of loss, and what if scenarios she never had before. And that's why pulling back doesn't push her away, it actually pulls her in deeper. Because people chase what they can't fully understand, they pursue what they can't easily predict, they value what they have to work for. And your emotional detachment transforms you from someone who was easy to read into someone worth figuring out. That shift is what makes her feel your absence in a way she never expected. And that's the moment she starts realizing you're not the same man she once knew. When you finally stop reacting to her distance, her mixed signals, her hesitation, and her inconsistency, something powerful begins to unfold beneath the surface. Emotional distance isn't about ignoring her or pretending you don't care. It's about reclaiming the energy you were giving away too freely. It's about choosing peace over anxiety, self respect over desperation, and direction over dependency. And when you make that internal shift, she feels it even if you don't say a single word. She notices that you're no longer emotionally anchored to her mood swings. She sees that your happiness no longer rises and falls based on how much attention she gives you. And that change disrupts everything she believed she controlled, because as long as you were invested emotionally, she felt safe. She knew that no matter how she behaved, no matter how far she pulled back, you'd still be there. You'd still message first, you'd still try to fix things, you'd still make excuses for her behavior, and that security made her careless. But the moment you detach, the moment you stop feeding the emotional loop, the dynamic flips. Suddenly, she's the one without the safety net. She's the one who starts feeling the pressure. She's the one who begins to question whether pushing you away was a mistake. Emotional distance hits differently when she can feel the difference in your energy. It's not just silence, it's the loss of your warmth, the absence of your reassurance, the missing presence of your steady support. That's what triggers the fear of losing you, because she never prepared for the day you'd stop loving from a place of need. She never expected you to reach that level of strength where you can walk away quietly without seeking her approval. And that strength becomes the catalyst for her regret. Women feel emotions deeply when the emotional connection they once relied on disappears. She might not have shown it when you were giving your all, but she always felt comforted by the fact that you cared, even if she acted indifferent. Deep down, she believed she could come back whenever she wanted. Emotional distance shatters that illusion. It shows her that you're not a backup plan. You're not a placeholder. You're a man with standards, self worth, and a life that doesn't revolve around her validation. And the more she realizes that your presence was a privilege, the more regret begins to grow. She starts questioning her choices. She wonders if her ego got in the way. She second guesses the moment she dismissed your efforts. Emotional distance forces her to confront the possibility that she may have lost someone who wasn't replaceable. And that fear, that sudden awareness of what she took for granted, becomes the spark that ignites her emotional spiral. Because when a man stops reacting, when he stops being emotionally available, when he stops feeding a woman's comfort, she eventually feels the loss in ways she never expected. And that's when regret takes root. When you finally stop pouring all your emotional energy into her and turn that focus back onto yourself, something shifts in a way she cannot ignore. It's not revenge, it's not punishment. It's not about trying to make her jealous or prove a point. It's simply you choosing yourself, your goals, your mission, your peace, over waiting around for someone who couldn't see your worth when it was right in front of her. And the moment you redirect your energy inward, everything about you becomes more attractive, not because you're trying harder, but because you've stopped trying at all. You're no longer chasing validation, you're creating value. That shift is magnetic. When you start improving your life, you naturally become more confident. Confidence isn't loud, it's steady, grounded, and undeniable. It shows up in the way you speak, the way you move, the way you make decisions, the standards you hold, and she notices all of it, even from a distance. She sees the discipline, she sees the growth, she sees the glow that comes from a man who's focused on his own path. And that's what gets her attention. You're not waiting for her anymore. You're building a life that doesn't need her approval to thrive. The truth is, people are drawn to strength, they're drawn to purpose, they're drawn to someone who knows where he's going. When you stop centering your world around her and start investing in your own, she feels that shift emotionally. Suddenly, the man she dismissed is not the same man she sees now. You're evolving while she's stuck comparing the current version of you to the one she took for granted. That comparison hits deep, it stings, because it forces her to realize that losing you wasn't just losing attention, it was losing access to a man with value. Your growth also creates distance in a natural way. Not the distance of ignoring someone, but the distance of elevation. When you level up, you rise above the drama, above the insecurities, above the emotional games. Women feel that elevation. They feel it when you don't react to things that used to trigger you. They feel it when you stop seeking validation. They feel it when you start moving with purpose instead of emotion. That type of energy is powerful, and she can't help but pay attention to it. And what really weighs on her is the realization that your life is better now, and she isn't part of it. That's when regret begins to sink in. She starts thinking about how she treated you, what she overlooked, what she underestimated. She remembers the loyalty, the effort, the stability you brought. She remembers the version of you who'd have done anything for her, and now that version doesn't exist anymore. Now you're someone she has to earn, someone she has to chase, someone she has to prove herself to. That reversal is what creates the emotional punch she never saw coming, because once you focus on your purpose, your value rises, and when your value rises, her regret follows right behind it. When you finally stop chasing, when you finally stop trying to convince her of your worth, when you finally stop being the one who always reaches out first, something inside her shifts in a way she never expected, because the moment your attention is no longer guaranteed, the dynamic between you begins to flip. She spent so long subconsciously believing she could pull back without losing you, believing she could withdraw but still keep you waiting, believing she could treat you with inconsistency and you'd still show up. But when you detach, when you stop reacting emotionally, she starts to feel a loss she never prepared herself to feel. It begins slowly, subtle thoughts, quick questions, small flashes of curiosity, but those tiny moments grow into something much deeper. At first, she just wonders why you're so calm, why you stop checking in, why you're not trying anymore. But as time passes, that curiosity turns into concern, then into confusion, then into fear, because she realizes she no longer has the comfort of knowing you're still emotionally invested. She realizes your love is no longer something she can take for granted. And that fear becomes a powerful motivator. That fear is what begins the pursuit, not because she suddenly decided to change overnight, but because losing your presence triggers something primal inside her, the desire to reconnect with someone who once made her feel secure. When you stop chasing, you give her space to feel the consequences of her decisions. You give her room to miss your presence, to miss your consistency, to miss your energy. And missing someone is the first step toward valuing them again. You were once predictable, you were once available, you were once easy to access. Now you become a mystery again. And mystery is one of the strongest emotional drivers of attraction. She starts wondering what you're doing, who you're becoming, whether someone else is benefiting from the version of you she took for granted. The more she wonders, the more she invests emotionally. Curiosity turns into longing, longing turns into regret, regret turns into the desire to reconnect. And the reason she begins to chase is simple: you've stopped feeding her ego, and the vacuum your absence creates forces her to confront her own feelings. For the first time, she touches the possibility of losing you for good. For the first time, she feels the gap your presence used to fill. And for the first time, she realizes you weren't chasing her because you were weak, you were chasing her because you cared. Now she sees the difference. Now she understands your value. Now she wants back what she pushed away. But by the time she starts chasing, you're no longer the same man. You've grown emotionally, you've built strength, you've learned detachment. You're no longer seeking her approval because you found something more powerful: self respect. And once a man reaches that point, the entire dynamic changes forever. And that's the moment she feels the full weight of losing what she thought she'd never lose.